Welcome back, everyone, for another super special bonus live episode of the Hired Geek podcast recorded here at EDUCAUSE in Nashville. We are continuing to have a bunch of amazing conversations. If you're following along, this will be the next to last episode that we release out from this event. And just been really excited to be a part of this and featuring another member of the EDUCAUSE team. We spoke with some of your colleagues yesterday. Excited to be going to bring you all on because obviously you just have kind of a broader perspective on like this event, this community, what's kind of happening here, and then obviously just doing a lot of other awesome work throughout the rest of the year. So if you want to just briefly introduce yourself, Nicole, your role at EDUCAUSE and your background, and then we'll get into kind of talking more about this year's event and some stuff around changing learner modality preferences and all that good
Sure.
stuff.
Thank you for having me, first of all. My name is Nicole Muscanell. I'm a researcher on the Research and Insights team at EDUCAUSE. I've been with EDUCAUSE for about 3 years now. And my background is actually in psychology, which you might not connect with technology and IT related things. So I specialize in social psychology, which is actually a field that's has a lot of overlap with sociology, but we just look at people at different levels. But the real translating part and what actually made me come to EDUCAUSE was more of the research side of my background. So I come from a really strong quantitative research field. I've always been in love with data and analytics. And so that's what brought me over here to EDUCAUSE. And so on the team, in terms of what I contribute to and what you might see in terms of my work, I work on the Horizon reports. I'm involved with most of those. I'm involved with the work study, so I help to lead those and co-author those. I am also involved with the annual student and faculty and technology studies as well.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a lot of good stuff, and certainly, even though it's like a little bit like different, like from your academic background, I get your studies and everything. Like it is
Mhm.
that idea of like there is so much to kind of play with, I guess, in this. It's a very unique kind of ecosystem of all kind of different stakeholders and different things. So I'm sure you have no shortage of things that are sort of like sparking your curiosity and leading your research efforts and everything. But if you want to, just we're kind of midway through the second day of the event, so there's still a little bit left to go. But what's been like a highlight of this event this year? If it's something that's already happened or something that you're looking forward to, anything that you want to call out, I guess that was kind of exceptional for you.
Yeah, well, I think the thing that stands out just because, and it happened this morning, was the big top 10 reveal. I think everyone's excited for that every year. What we saw in the top 10 were big themes surrounding AI, of course, but also data, right? So we had, I think, at least three of the issues on the top 10 were related to data and analytics, governance, literacy issues that are all big things. And that overlaps what we've seen in the Horizon reports. So we just recently published the 2025 Data and Analytics Horizon report, which I co-authored, and a lot of it overlaps with the top 10, which I think is a good thing because it really signals that these big issues like data governance, literacy is not just data literacy, but AI literacy, digital literacy, these are really pressing topics. And I think kind of the highlight is seeing the progress that institutions have made at this point. I think that if you think back the past couple years, we were kind of in a state where it was like, AI is bad, it's terrible, and it's gonna destroy the world. But if you look at this year, what a lot of the sessions are about, we've moved on to the point where we're like, "Oh, no, AI is useful, actually, we need this. Everybody's gonna have to use this, and it's actually probably a good opportunity." And so now we're really focusing on the big things that we need to be focusing on and not just saying that these are important, but institutions are starting to work on them. And so when I talk about that, what I mean is institutions are actually starting to do the legwork of strengthening their governance structures. They're trying to actually empower people across the institution to be able to, use data well, to use AI well, and to do so ethically and responsibly. So I think like the biggest cool thing is that we're not still stuck in the, like AI is destroying the world and it's going to be terrible for everybody phase. And we're making slow progress, but we're making progress.
Yeah, and I think just the idea that this year's event, I think, is kind of showcasing that very well. I get like a lot of the conversations and the tools and vendors and things like that. I've been kind of observing that where like you're seeing kind of these tactical deployments, like good examples, tangible things that people are doing that I think does the kind of dissuade sort of fear or apprehension, like that ambiguity and stuff could be tough, especially with something like this that feels very boogeyman-ish or whatever. But like, yeah, like sort of like the fear cycle and kind of a hype cycle and whatever else, I think it all is sort of kind of settling in to where I think there's just the important conversations about like keeping humans in the loop and different things I'm just excited to see and how, these newly empowered tools and platforms and things can really help to augment and enable people's kind of full potential. So what I wanted to kind of talk with you about, and I'll also just because it was on my mind, we talked with Mark and Krista about the top 10. Obviously, I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
clearly you were sort of like jazzed or kind of like, oh, it's great to see all this stuff. So it's like, please go listen to that episode too. Again, we'll have like
Yeah.
the full list linked to that episode too. I think, I'm always appreciative of the opportunities to just kind of get a glimpse and sort of what's happening kind of the teaching and learning space. Like a lot of my background and kind of interest areas have been around kind of student success and kind of co-curricular things. So, but kind of changing learning modality preferences from learners. I mean, a lot of my background also is in like digital education. So I'm always kind of excited to see kind of conversations about this continual kind of evolution. But I guess if you just want to sort of take a quick snapshot of where we feel like we are right now with those kind of changing learning modality preferences and what are some of the kind of benefits and risks that institutions need to be mindful of as they're sort of adapting to these dynamics.
And it's a good question. It's relevant because I think we're at a time where we're seeing modalities start to shift around a bit, but I think it's also going to continue to shift. And so if you look at our Students in Technology 2025 report, we cover some of this in there. I think right now the biggest thing that came out of that report is, and we've seen this actually for multiple years in a row in that report, is the theme that students want flexibility and choice, but a lot of them still do have preference for on-site experiences, right? So they do want that engagement, that in-person connection. They want to connect with their instructors in person.
Hmm.
They really do prefer that. But despite that, they also do recognize that, hey, not everybody has the same lifestyle and background. Some people work, some people are caregivers or they have children or families. And so they recognize not just for themselves, but other students too, that choice and flexibility is going to be important for learning, continuing moving forward. And so it can't just be on-site in-person experiences because that's not going to work for everybody. And I think this is even more true when you think about how we're going to face the enrollment cliff and probably start to see more shifts in the demographics of students. So I think we're probably going to see maybe more diversity in the types of students that we're going to see in colleges because it's not going to be just the traditional college age student anymore. And also, let's throw AI into the mix because we have
Do
to.
it. Yeah.
um, with AI, we know, okay, so everybody, not just like, we're not just talking about students, but just everybody more generally is going to need some sort of level of skill set in AI because it's going to be embedded into our daily lives. It's already kind of there. But I think with that, what we're going to see is that there's going to be an ongoing need for continuous learning just to stay up to date with AI and other emerging technologies. So I think that's going to drive people at all areas of life to have to come back and, reskill, upskill, and keep up with this quickly changing technology. I think it's going to get diverse. And with diversity, you're going to have learning options that are going to work for everybody. And it's not going to be a one size fits all.
Yeah. And I think that what I'm kind of excited about is that like, I guess on both the sides, because I think that idea of like kind of just more uh, kind of dynamic learning modality options and stuff like the idea of kind of what you're getting at, like all those things that kind of impact students' lives, like could also like change from one semester to the next or something, because that idea of like, yeah, I was doing all my classes in person, but like life happened and I can either go fully online or hybrid or even just like changing the pace of like, how many courses you're taking. But so I think it's that idea of like, because I think it's, there's been a kind of a more expansion of digital education on institutions, but it was kind of like, well, you're in this lane, like you are an online MBA student, like that's who you are, and you're kind of in that lane, or you're an on-ground student, but that like within the same semester or from semester to semester, like I think that's what I think is kind of the next chapter of this is that, more agile kind of, learning modality, kind of how students can kind of choose their own adventure, so to speak. But so Yeah, the other thing, just to not lose the thread, I think to the honor is that like there's been all this sort of like around like lifelong learning, like and all this stuff, and like I think this is like it is to what you're saying, like going to be kind of forcing that point where I'm sure some people would be like, well, yeah, maybe I don't know, whatever, it's like, oh my gosh, yeah, the AI of it all, like I'm probably going to need to keep up on that, and I think it is an opportunity for institutions to really kind of leverage their brands or their sort of like credibility, their sort of ability to create really supportive learning environments versus
Mhm.
just like, there's going to be no shortage as there has been, with other subject matters and stuff, but like, just places that you could go to just sort of like kind of teach it yourself and stuff. But it's like, my hope is that institutions recognize the opportunity of like, no, come here because you're getting like more bang for your buck in the sense of like, the idea of like, you're going to be part of our community, have our resources and like different things like that versus just like having to like muscle through it on your own of like watching YouTube videos about AI and whatever
Mhm.
else. It's like, yeah, and that's there and that'll always be there. But like, so I think, yeah, that's an interesting dynamic that's at play here. But I think if you want to also just, that other part of my question of like the benefits and risks, I think, like you
Mhm.
said, there's like the enrollment cliff and it could be like, okay, great benefit. We're going to, kind of expand our, digital education portfolio as an institution. There's like a benefit like that. But I think there's also like risks that they might not be anticipating because it's like, oh, this is like a thing that we've just like not really done, fully in earnest. Like we maybe did it because we had to in the pandemic, but like, so now it's like there's, I think, a lot more things that like a lot more context that institutional leaders need to be mindful of as they're navigating into this sort of this wave of digital transformation when it comes to their like learning modality offering. So just any quick hits of just
Mm.
the benefits, risks, whatever comes to mind that you want to make sure people are kind of thinking about and considering.
I mean, I think the benefit is that with, the speed of technology change and the expected change in student demographics, right? I think the good thing is that it's going to basically force institutions to become adaptable and more dynamic. They're not going to be able to choose like I'm not going to do this because that won't be sustainable. And so the benefit is that I think students are just going to see over time higher quality flexible options for learning. And hopefully, if we're being optimistic, that we can better serve more students and not just what we typically think of as the traditional college students. And then risks. Certainly there are risks. So I think one that comes to mind for me would be overinvestment in technology. So I think it's going to be easy to say, "Oh my gosh, we need to make things more flexible. We need to be high flex, hybrid, whatever." So we need to buy all these shiny new tools to support that. But then it's like, okay, what are your governance structures looking like? Do people have the skills and not just like the data experts, the IT experts, but do your students have a baseline skill level where they can interpret and use these things wisely? Faculty are going to need a certain level of skills
Mhm.
to be able to teach like this. So it's across the board. I think the risk is we get too focused on implementing these technologies to support these changes, and then we don't keep up with the really foundational things like making sure we have the policies and structures and the infrastructure in place to make sure that we're not doing this poorly. Yes, we can provide flexible learning options, but they're not good. I think that's the big risk.
Right. Yeah, because it'd be like just trying to like check the boxes. Like we've got online courses, whatever. And it's like
Yeah.
it leaves a lot to be desired. Like, you need to put some work in there. And I think well said to also just kind of like measure, kind of take a measured approach to like the investment that you're making. Cause I think like we saw like the Harvards of the world when like the pandemic was happening, where they like had these like space age studios that they were like, broadcasting classes out from and all that. And it's like, that's great. That's amazing. That's really cool. Not every institution has to think that that's like, oh, if we're going to do it, we got to do that. Right. That's what it
Mhm.
requires. It's like, no, not really. And like, finding your lane, right sizing expectations. Because I would imagine too, and I think this is eroding a little bit, but like people kind of got like dollar signs in their eyes. I think institutional leaders are just like, oh, it's just like adding on, more courses or these online programs and stuff. It's just going to be like a windfall of money, and especially when it was like really focused on all these like graduate degrees and things like that. But like I think level set expectations there. There could be that risk of like it's probably going to be like more expensive than you think it is. Not, or like there's some sort of like area where it's like that idea of like the overinvestment. It's like, well, you don't need to spend that much. It's like, but you also, you can't spend nothing. Like you got to get it like
Mhm.
right there to get like the good quality and understand again, sort of the like, you know, the revenue or different things that you're going to get from it. It's like, it's going to take time, like, and just even the idea of like you're saying kind of like norming the culture. I think that is just like a piece of advice, I guess, is patience in a sense, or sort of the like kind of continuous improvement, kind of iterative nature of this, of like, because I think that that would maybe be this sort of earnest core is like, well, we want to do it the best. We got to get all the best stuff and all that. It's like, I mean, we could work towards that. Like, we need to start somewhere and kind of do our best effort, as kind of this version 1.0 of, you know, hybrid or, fully online courses, programs, and this sort of thing. But like, I don't know. So I think, yeah, it is like a lot of conversations that, I mean, we have here, and I feel like they're happening, here on the podcast and at this event of really acknowledging that like cultural piece, the change management piece of like, okay, we're just always kind of getting hit by all these waves of digital transformation. How are we sort of like enduring that and coming out of it, on the other side, in a really positive place where like the implementation is really kind of stuck and like, people feel really comfortable and confident and, we're not over or under investing, like or doing it in the wrong areas, or it's like you don't need to spend so much on that. You should be spending more on like getting
Yeah.
great learning content, not like, yeah, like fancy toys or something. So
I
yeah, it's a lot of interesting dynamics.
and
Yeah.
I think that, another thing here that's really a big issue is you're mentioning, continuous improvement and change management. And, that's just going to continue. And I think right now it's difficult for higher education institutions to find that speed that, like, okay, we're keeping up enough, but we still are able to keep up with our governance and everything, keeping up with literacy skills. We're not falling behind, but we're not going too fast. Like, so there's a middle ground somewhere
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Again, kind of throttling into the right gear or
yes,
something,
yeah.
of a good metaphor. Cause I think, like, yeah, I think we've seen to date where there was like sort of the ambiguity or skepticism around, any of the kind of digital transformation that's been happening is that like some of those like pieces were the like limiting factors of just like, oh, we're going to like jump through all these hoops or do this or that, the other thing. So it's like, well, yeah, you don't want to like go too slow and get behind. You don't want to go too fast and be bulldozing or sort of, overlooking things. And then you kind of really, sort of step in it when it's just like, oh my gosh, we overlooked a sort of data governance piece that we really should have been a lot more thoughtful about. And I'm glad too that I feel like on the vendor side, like they're sort of being kind of mindful of that as well. Like, uh, like ed tech companies sort of celebrating like we're SOC 2 compliant or whatever. And like that's like a thing that they want to like put out into the world and celebrate. And it's like, great. Yes. Like shine a light on that and make it kind of like mainstream. That's just like a thing that people think about and talk about and kind of normalize because it is like a really important thing that should not be sort of sequestered over into like, just like the IT team, or whatever else. Like it should
Mhm.
just be something that we're all thinking about of like just kind of our habits and things. So, but you've already given some great morsels of wisdom here and perspectives from your research and your work and everything. As wrapping up, always like to give kind of the final word, any sort of final bits of advice, resources, calls to action. Do what you will here to help us close out the episode.
What I've been hearing, people are saying, "Oh man, I feel so anxious because I feel like I'm behind. I feel like my institution's behind." Most people are saying that, right? So it just turns out that you're not actually alone. I think a lot of institutions are trying to figure things out at this point and make themselves sustainable. And so my point I'd like to make is a lot of institutions are feeling this way. A lot of leaders and professionals are feeling this way. And don't get too bogged down by the overwhelming world that we're living in. And that includes, not only AI, but just kind of globally, culturally, all the changes that we're going to face and we're facing right now. But specifically, if we point back to EDUCAUSE and our resources too, I would want to point those out. And I think we have some great future forward thinking pieces or products. Top 10 obviously is one of them. Horizon Reports right up there with it because both of those Top 10 and Horizon Reports utilize strategic foresight as the framework, right? So we're essentially putting together these insights for institutions they're not just there to tell you, like, here's what's changing, here's what's going to change, and here's what the world might look like. But those are meant to be action tools, right? So I would point people to those resources because those are going to be the reports that help you start to envision possible futures, not just one. You have to be prepared for many. And that's what you can use those reports for is say, okay, A, B, C, and D could happen. How can I get started today to start to take steps to prepare? And we always tell people too, um, you don't tackle everything at once because it's not feasible. So start small and use our reports, use the top 10, use the Horizon reports as just a starting point. Like focus in on maybe one or two trends from the report and start to bring conversation to stakeholders at your institution. Align a couple of those priority trends with your goals that are already existing at your institution and start to take actionable steps like do small pilots, right? And then scale from there from what you learn based on that. And I think the overall point of all of this would just be like, don't get too overwhelmed. Everybody's kind of in the same boat. And, we have a lot of resources for people to use. It's, I think, good to think about this as kind of we have to take some small steps at first and gain some momentum from there.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to end on, because yeah, I think the normalization of things, because it's like yeah, we're all kind of navigating without maybe like the full context of what others are going through, and being a part of a community like EDUCAUSE is like really great for that of like normalizing and kind of talking through stuff, and I think yeah, like my big takeaway from what you were saying is that like thought of such a like a parallel with students, like they get kind of caught up about like I'm behind or whatever. It's like, hey, be on your own timeline. Like as long as you have a timeline, like you're fine. Like you're on your own journey here. And I think that is for like institutional leaders creating their strategy. It's like you just need to have a plan and kind of not feel like you're trying to do everything all at once to try to catch up and again like move too quickly and overlook things or whatever. It's like just have a plan about how you're going to integrate AI more into your uh, curriculum or something, like, because I think the absence of it, that's the sort of like the risk or the pitfall is just sort of like that you're kind of like, oh yeah, we should be thinking about this, we should do that or whatever. And then you like, kind of fumble your way into it or through it or whatever. So I think it's just like, just have a plan, figure out kind of your timeline and the way that you're going to do it and do it the right way and with the right considerations and stuff. So, and yeah, and then like, there's so many great resources to guide you along on that journey
Yeah.
from EDUCAUSE and everything. So,
Well, and you just made me
yeah.
think of one last thing is, besides our reports and, what's printed on paper or posted online, we provide so much networking and opportunities to connect with peer institutions. So this can be another thing where you look to EDUCAUSE okay, maybe I'll join some community groups, or if you're here at annual, I can actually meet up with other folks from institutions especially institutions that might be relevant and similar in terms of context to mine. And let me see what they're doing. Maybe I am fumbling around and I don't know what I'm doing, but there's plenty of other people here at the conference and in our community groups who can actually say, hey, we're testing this out and this is how it's going. So you don't have to navigate alone.
Yeah, amazing. So appreciate you sharing all that you did, all the work that you do, and ways to connect with you and your work at EDUCAUSE and the episode description. But just thank you so much for hanging out.
Yeah, thanks for having me.